My bold statement is that Fender would not be where it is today, would not be the company that it is today if it weren't for two things. And one of them is the Asian counterfeiters in the 70s and the 80s. The other is Jimi Hendrix. So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Fender was going to discontinue the Stratocaster. They were discussing it, I think, as early as '66 after they completed the purchase from Leo Fender. And they were going to put their money and their efforts behind the Jazzmaster, which was seen by them as the evolution of the electric guitar. And the Fender Stratocaster sales had dropped significantly enough that they were going to discontinue the guitar. So if it weren't for Jimi Hendrix, who came out in '67 and really lit the guitar playing world on fire, the Fender Stratocaster would be in the history books. Jimi Hendrix was a explosive personality, an amazing entertainer, and an incredible player. And he played with a absolute creativity. There's sort of a avant-garde element to his playing. And to some people that was a turnoff, but to the young people, he was like, it was almost like punk before there was punk. There was, Jimi Hendrix was like turning the world upside down. And, he has sold a lot of electric guitars for Fender. And Clapton then, picked up where Jimi Hendrix had, Clapton, I think he has said that he saw Buddy Guy playing one. Hank Marvin was a big fan. Buddy Holly, he was a big fan of. And Steve Winwood, who was a friend of his, had an American electric guitar, a Fender Stratocaster. And so he got one. I think Hendrix's emergence had sort of solidified it for him. And Clapton has sold a lot of Fender products over the years. His signature guitar is probably the best-selling signature guitar that Fender has ever put out. It's been basically the same guitar since 1988. It's based on a 1957 Stratocaster, but it has 22 frets. The truss rod adjustment is at the headstock. It's got a 57 style neck that's also somewhat influenced by a Martin that Clapton had. And in 2000, they changed the pickups from lace sensor to Fender vintage noiseless. Other than that, it's pretty much the same guitar ever since it was introduced. I think the neck dimension on the ones post-2000 is slightly slimmer. I think if you get the pre-2000 ones, you're getting a slightly beefier neck. But other than that, the guitar's been the same. And he sold a lot of them. He sold a lot of other Fender products for them, just based on his popularity and his musical catalog. But Clapton didn't play contemporary Stratocasters. He did not play a 1975 Stratocaster in 1975. I mean, he might have owned one, but he was known for his Brownie and his Blackie vintage guitars, which were parts casters, I'll just remind you. And the quality of the Fender instruments had, under CBS, this management, had declined so much that they just weren't popular. And for some reason, Japanese companies like Fernandez, Tokai, Greco picked up on this. They had 50s and 60s guitars, Stratocasters and Telecasters and Jazzmasters, and they made replicas based on the real thing. They made, and if you buy the higher tier ones from, like if you buy a Tokai from 78, 79, 80, and you buy an ST100 or ST80, you're basically getting a handmade replica of a vintage Fender. And the Japanese craftsmanship is so well regarded. It's very likely you're getting a guitar that's as good as what it was based off of, maybe even better in some cases. Alternatively, you could buy a Fender made in America instrument from the same era, and it's going to be, chances are it's going to be crap. I know there's some good examples, but it's going to be nowhere near as good. And I'll tell you why. It's because the reinvestment into the factory was just not there. Fender was not, they were trying to save as much money and put out as much product. So, you know, like I think by the mid 70s, the bridge is just shitty metal. The tuners changed, I think, in the earlier part of the mid 70s. They looked the same, but I mean, there was these new tuners that came out, the Schaller tuners that came out, I think in like 68. But by the mid 70s, they looked the same, but they were just not the same level of quality. I was recently in a guitar store and I saw a 1976 Fender Stratocaster. It was a beautiful guitar. It was a maple fretboard. I believe it was a sunburst body, and it had been put back into stock condition after some heavy modification. The bridge had been routed for a humbucker, and the nut had been replaced with a locking nut, which required holes to be drilled. But these had been filled in professionally. A traditional style nut had been put back in. The tuners had been replaced with something that looked vintage, quality tuners, and the original pickups were put back in. And I saw the guitar, it was locked up. They were asking 3,000 Canadian, which is like 2,300 US. And that's an intriguing price for a real vintage instrument. I went back, I thought about it, I went back and I asked if I could play it. I plugged it into an amp and it sounded great. It actually felt pretty good. The frets had been redone. They had like jumbo frets on it. But here, where the neck meets the pocket, was like so misaligned. There's such a ledge on the body side of that, where that meets. I couldn't really, if I was gonna spend that kind of money, you want something that you can play, you know? If you were just gonna hang it on a wall or save it for a sale later, I kind of get it. It's cool, it looked really cool, played pretty cool, but it just shows you the craftsmanship was terrible. And because they weren't maintaining their equipment, the carves, the belly carve is, on these instruments is not as deep, it's shallow, it doesn't look as good. The carve here, as the forearm cut, can be pretty thick and pretty pathetic. And it's just because they didn't care anymore. And the Japanese counterfeiters did care. They made high quality products that replicated Fender's golden age, the 50s and the 60s. And I don't think they distributed them to the States very much, but they definitely distributed them to Europe and around Asia and Canada. And they are great guitars. I would, from a player's standpoint, I would prefer, if I was gonna spend $3,000 on a vintage Fender or a Tokai ST100, I'd get the Tokai ST100. You're just getting a guitar that's made in a superior fashion. And it's gonna feel great and it's gonna sound great. So Fender is sending out these cease and desist letters, and they have every right to protect their assets. And this default judgment in Dusseldorf put a bit of wind in their sails to do this. But I think everyone should remember that the Stratocaster was going to be discontinued in the later part of the mid 60s, like 67, and Hendrix saved that from happening. So as much as it's an asset today, at one point it wasn't seen as being much of an asset. And just what I'm holding here is a 1983 Squier Stratocaster. And the story behind these is that Fender's sales had plummeted because their quality control was so terrible. In an effort to revamp the company, they hired new management, new executives, and they brought over a guy, Bill Schultz from Yamaha. And his first thing he did was introduce Fender to the Japanese factories that were knocking off their guitars. And they obviously held their work in high regard because Fender outsourced manufacturing to these same factories. And in 1985, a sale was made CBS sold the company to a conglomerate of like the employees and some investors. And that sale did not include the factory. As a result, there are no US made guitars from Fender in 1985. They were all outsourced to Japan. And when guitars like this showed up in the States, this is an 83 Fender product made in Japan by the same company that was making counterfeit guitars in the 70s and the 80s. And they had tried to sue. And when the new management and the employees saw the quality of these, it really inspired them on what they could do. And this guitar, even though it's like a lower tier instrument for like the student market at the time, to this day it's as good as anything you'll get from Fender. And that is because the labor, you know, the selection of wood on these was just going to be random or based on its cost. In some cases you get alder bodies, in some cases you get basswood. But it was really the labor was where they were saving the money. And just something simple like a lacquer finish or a nice piece of ash or a better piece of maple would put the guitar in a higher tier. These ST50s, ST57s have a slimmer neck profile, still within what Fender put out in vintage instruments. And then the ones that were a little more expensive had a little beefier neck profile. And that probably speaks to like how, generally speaking, beginners like something a little bit more forgiving, and more advanced players like something that feels maybe a little more full in their hand. So yeah, if it weren't for Hendrix and the Asian counterfeiters, Fender would not be the company that it is today, and the Stratocaster would not be the guitar that it is today.